Welcome to Deeply Unscripted. I'm your host, Clarissa Medina, a cognitive behavioral practitioner helping people break free from limiting beliefs through rewiring thought patterns. By using these methods, I facilitate an individual stepping into true transformation. Another excellent way to spark transformation and personal growth is through authentic conversations that challenge us to upgrade our thinking and perspectives. Here on the podcast, we explore profound subject matter and make room for a diversity of viewpoints. In doing so, we create a community that honors everyone right where they are in their own compelling story. Today's guest really is a force of nature when it comes to reimagining education, not just in the classroom, but in our communities, in our conversations, and even how we see ourselves. LaToya Germane is the founder of Germane Learning, where curiosity, joy, and liberation lead the way. She's not just dismantling outdated systems, she is creating wildly imaginative spaces for unlearning, play, and ability. Whether she's designing immersive learning experiences or challenging what it means to be educated, LaToya is proof that when we let go of rigidity and embrace wonder, learning becomes transformational. So, LaToya, I am so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I am too. I've really been looking forward to this. So, the first question we're going to open it up with your work fuses education, creativity, and community in a bold, boundary breaking way. Can you take us back to the moment when you realized traditional learning models weren't cutting it and how that sparked the vision for Germane Learning?
Absolutely. So I was thinking about this, and I think it started probably way before I was aware of it, like during high school. I think that when I was an adolescent, that's when I started to have some of the troubling times that I think a lot of people associate with adolescence. And I think it stemmed from the realization that I wasn't learning or in my creative zone or feeling connected to myself or other people in a way that I had been before. And I realize now that's the natural state of being of humans. You know, when you are around young children, they're always like excited, they're on the go, they want to do everything, they're curious, they're putting things together. They want to talk to people, they want to connect with people. And then somewhere along the lines, we just aren't in that energy anymore. And by the time I was in middle school and high school, the school experience, even though I have always been like kind of like an academic type, you know, I've always enjoyed reading and writing and learning and talking about learning. By the time I was in middle school, I was like, I hate this. Really, I was in a very dark space of going through the motions, doing what I had to do, but feeling drudgery, feeling like this is not really it, but this is what everybody else is doing. So this must be what I have to do. But I stayed in that status quo up until just recently. And it was a gradual, but also not so kind of progression out of that space where God basically ejected me entirely out of the education system along with my four children after a long career of teaching in my life, where again, the irony was so loud. It was like, you're in this environment that's, you know, on the surface, it's about learning, it's about community, it's about expression and growth. But in the day to day, it wasn't feeling like that, you know? So that dissatisfaction that I have been feeling for over a decade in my career finally just came to a head. And I accepted the path that was placed in front of me to go learn in a new way, in a more natural way, and invite other women, especially, to come learn with me.
Wow. Okay. So that brings up really, I've got some thoughts. So, number one, I love that you mentioned that that is the natural state of being as we are as children.
Mm,
And progressively, as we go through the model, the traditional school model, that really is a system of going through the motion.
mm,
And that just automatically it kills or at the very minimum dampens that natural state of being of connection of
right.
that talking about.
Absolutely. I think I heard someone talk about how when we're young, we're closer to God, and we may all have different religious or spiritual beliefs, but I think most people agree that we were created by some supreme highest being which is a creator, and we were created in the image of that creator, which means we're supposed to be creating. That is what we're supposed to do. But what happens in a school environment, especially as a person progresses through the ages. I was a high school teacher, by the way. I taught 7th through 12th grade language arts. And even in that space, which you think literature and language arts isn't art, but at the same time, a teacher has daily objectives. They have a curriculum to follow. They have the whole semester goals and what children may actually be feeling or thinking or being pulled to create is not relevant necessarily to those objectives of school. So we do get gradually pulled into a place where our resources, our mental and spiritual resources are being entirely wasted because we're being put through this system of objectives, state exams, reading level, and all these different frameworks that get placed around. So I can see it as an analogy, like if we are all like plants and we grow organically, there's no prescribed way that the leaves or the flowers have to grow. But if you put them inside of a box, it's not gonna bloom fully, right? It's not gonna be what it's really meant to be. And I think that's what the school system is doing to us, is like putting us in a box that measures us all by the same standards that are kind of arbitrary. And it locks us in a space where we're not free to create like we're intended to.
Yes, and with both of my sons, we have not ever been part of the public school system. My oldest son, we did private school before we started homeschooling, but then my younger son has always been homeschooled.
Mhm.
But truthfully, even in that environment, because of my own strengths and weaknesses, I had to be intentional about pulling in those additional resources so that I didn't
Mm,
basically do the same thing to them.
right. Right.
Oh, because what I noticed about myself was whatever space I was living in at the time. And sometimes those spaces would be more creative and sometimes
Hmm.
less, depending
Hmm.
on life. Um,
Right.
that would come out in my teaching. So, and that is how my home would flow. Then, public school is a business.
Yep.
It is a system,
Mm,
and if you want to rely on that system, you absolutely, as the parent, have to be intentional about
mm,
making sure that your kids are exposed to
mm,
those the creative resources so that you don't kill that natural desire for learning because kids
right.
actually love to learn.
Do. They do. And you brought us back to the point about connection because you are conscious as a mother who has your son's best interests at heart. You can assess what they need and what you lack or what you can give them. But that reflection and connection does not exist in the school system,
Right.
right? So there's no way that a person like me who was a teacher, right? And I taught 5 classes a day, every day, and each class has 34 kids on average. I don't know these children. They're not my children. Even if I love them and have the best intentions, there's only so much I can humanly do, and I can't connect to any child in the way that I can connect with my own, right? So that is a key piece that it doesn't matter what we do with reform and education and you just can't replace that what you just described, where you know your son, you know yourself, you know what's necessary to help him elevate, and you have a vested interest in it in a way nobody else does. That is another piece that I think is unfortunate about the mainstream way of learning.
Yeah, exactly. Where did this turn into, and we haven't had enough conversation for me to know how this kind of partnered up in your life as what you do as an entrepreneur.
Mm. I take no personal credit for how this unfolded. This was God's divine design. So I could have scripted it if I wanted to. How this all came together was um in t- so I you mentioned your two children have been one in the school system and one in not at all. I have a similar pattern because I have 4 daughters and my older two who are young adults now, they went through the traditional public school system up at least until high school or a little bit into it. And then I have 2 younger ones who I'm so grateful have not. had that experience. They have not matriculated into the public school system. And the difference is stark. And how it happened, the change was not even my plan. Again, in 2019, um, a change in the regulations in my state put us in a position where we had to choose if we were going to continue along that public school route or if we were going to leave because we wouldn't comply with something that the government said we needed to comply with. So, on the surface, to other people, I think it did look like a choice. But for us as parents, it was like, this is a clear closing of a door, right? This means that we cannot return, right? Because my faith told me that's over. You can't do what they ask you to do. This is God. I gave you an instruction on what you need to do to protect your children. And the state is telling you to do otherwise. What are you going to do? So that was the first step where I had to decide very abruptly from one end of a school year to the beginning of the next that we were suddenly going to homeschool. That was a huge upheaval in our family. It was not easy. It was something of a grieving process that we had to go through because I've been attached to the school system. My whole identity has been attached to the school system my entire life. And suddenly all my girls had to stay home and I was going to work, right? I was going 2 hours commuting into the city to teach. So that was like, all right, I got half of myself out. What about the other half who's still going through the motions? I'm still showing up and babysitting other people's kids while my kids are at home. So I did not have an exit strategy. I had no clue what I was going to do. I was kind of really still in a panic mode in the first few months of trying to figure out like how am I supposed to manage this? I'm leaving the house in the dark of the morning, going to school and coming home and doing lessons and trying to get everybody together. And then as God would have it, March 2020 rolled around. And when COVID started, we went remote from school. So I was now physically even more so where I needed to be, right? Now I'm like, all right, the kids are home. Now I'm physically home, but I'm still chained to the bureaucracy of the system. So it just unfolded beautifully. I was like, what do we do as a family, right? Like, what are we passionate about? What are we good at? And we started to build businesses around those things, like publishing books on Amazon. Or with my older girls, they developed a company where they were creating organic and beauty products. With my little girls, they were making art. We had an art gallery. So all these things started to be born from that place of necessity and it was a learning experience. It was like the next level up of willingness, right? It was me showing the Most High, I'm open, I'm ready, I'm willing. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna do it, right? I'm doing it. So I think with that energy of openness and craving direction, that I attracted some opportunities into my life that elevated my entrepreneurship because by myself, I was just not doing it. You know what I mean? Like we were creating things, but I wasn't making any money. I still have bills to pay, like it's all great to be creative and visionary and want to have freedom and fun, but you also have still responsibilities. So I landed myself in an educational environment where people were willing to teach me these concepts about entrepreneurship and about personal education and about finances in a way that I could actually do it. You know what I mean? Like there's a path already paved here, and there's people along the path who are like, come on in, let me show you how to do this. And so that's how it went. And once I came into it and I started to realize what a gift I had been given and the opportunity to learn in a real way, not in a school prescribed way that has you learn the skill sets necessary to sell your time, but the self education required to have the grit, the courage, the wherewithal to actually build something meaningful and change your family. That's what I was welcomed into. And that's what I've been doing ever since is learning and inviting people to learn with us.
Yeah, there's a lot of paradigm shifting. So, leaving the job.
Yep.
And, I wasn't a teacher, but I had to leave a corporate job to
Mhm.
homeschool.
Mhm.
Uh, so all of these beliefs that we have about money
Mhm.
and the temptation is to give up your independence. I've seen this being the president of the co-op here
Mhm.
in our city, the co-op that we not only were part of, but that I was president of for well, actually it is really what that in my neck of the woods anyway. Um,
Right.
I've seen over that women, it's because most homeschool families are single income families. The husband is
Mhm.
the one working and the wife is the one staying home. And that I
Mhm.
would say that's 90% probably.
Right.
There are some other unusual circumstances where the husband maybe is working from home and maybe they have a home-based business that they're both working
Right.
on. The majority of families that I have been involved with, the husband leaves, has a commute, goes to his job, wife stays home, homeschools the kids, and she's, taking care of the home. And there's few income opportunities
Mhm.
for that female, for that
Mhm.
mom.
Right.
So that's another paradigm shift is
Mhm.
you quit a job to do this. Well, you're talking about half of your income,
Yeah.
presumably,
Yep.
depending on what you make versus what your husband makes. Losing that, losing your independence because now I don't bring anything
Right.
into the equation from a financial standpoint. Um, that is a very scary
It
prospect
is.
for a woman. And then there are a few examples of some single women that are homeschooling and they are self-employed in some
Right.
way.
Right.
A lot of the argument, and I mean, it's a fair argument because sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
Argument about, number one, I can't give up this income.
Yeah.
And number two, I am a single mom. So I am even more dependent upon my income than a married couple that
Right.
just making the decision to homeschool. So there's so much about this financial paradigm
Yeah.
that, it's scary.
Yeah. It is, and I understand it. I definitely understand it, but I think that, like we were talking about this earlier, there's a palpable energy shift happening, right? And I think what is dying is the idea that we have to choose. Right? Like that we have to either prioritize our family or our career, or our faith or our finance. Now we're coming into a new stage of our being as a collective where we can have it all. Like we actually can. And it has never been more real. Now you see so many different people who are building income in creative ways that our generation, I could never have imagined the world as it is right now when I was younger. I just thought you go to school, you get a degree, you get a good job, you stay there for 50 years and do what they tell you, and maybe you can retire later, and that still exists. And for a lot of people, maybe that will always be the reality. But there is this revolution where a lot of us are demanding energetically for something different to become available. And that's what's happening. And I just want to add to the point because it's a big topic of conversation. Like you mentioned, people who might want to homeschool or, they at least want to explore the possibility, but they feel like they can't, right? They feel like I still have to work. I just want to say you can, and it is a sacrifice because some people tend to look at it like it must be nice. I've heard people say it like that. Like it must be nice to be able
Yep.
to stay home with your kids and, be with them all day and build a business. It's not easy. It's something that we've chosen to do. It's not easy, but it's something that is important for us to put these other expectations to the side or change certain standards that we have in the beginning as we build a business or be willing to say, you know what, today I must focus on this and something else has to kind of suffer a little bit while I'm doing that. Right. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It is a choice that some of us have decided is important enough to figure out. So it's not to say that the reality isn't real. Like, yeah, we still have to pay the bills, but there's nothing more important than the actual real asset, which is time and connection, right? So we're sacrificing our children, ourselves for the sake of chasing money, for me is blasphemy. And I'm so grateful that again, like I've been given this opportunity to put things back in the proper order because we shouldn't be chasing money and throwing away our actual life. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy, but it's normal. So yeah, I understand people's feeling of like, I have to do what's comfortable and predictable and stable, but no, you don't.
And what I've told people when I get comments like that, it has its own set of problems. It has
Mhm.
its own set of issues. It's not a perfect solution. There nothing is perfect.
Right.
Uh, and it takes a different kind of grit to do
Mhm.
that. When I was working all day, I was a paralegal for 23 years. When I did
Mhm.
that, and I would take my older son for the couple of he was in private school until second grade. We started homeschooling in third grade. Me leaving him with that school because they had a before school program and an after school program. That took a different kind of grit and
Mhm.
miserable. And I hated
Yep.
leaving him
Yep.
every morning. And like you said, out of leaving home when it's dark, I'm getting home when it's dark.
Yeah.
And in that time, I'm trying to squeeze in that time that I'm home between when I'm off work and
Right.
bedtime.
Right.
Um, I wasn't putting together lesson plans because I wasn't a teacher, but I'm cooking
Mhm.
and I'm
Right.
doing homework with him.
Right.
So that precious little time that I had, it was miserable, but it still took me grinding that out and it was a very big God thing when the Lord said, you're going to start homeschooling in third grade. I was like, what? I don't know. I didn't know any homeschoolers. I was not attached at all to a homeschool community. I was like, I'm not even a teacher. I'm in the legal field. I'm the farthest picture of what a homeschool mom would look like. So making that transition required a different type of grit come from me. In this era right now that we're in, and I do agree with you, things are changing. And I don't know where we're at in the bell curve of acceptance because, in the beginning, there's the pioneers that are doing
Right.
it and everybody else is calling them crazy. And
Right.
then you get the early adopters and then later on you get the laggers. Now
Yep.
you got people that are just not getting on board for whatever their own personal convictions are.
Right.
But where we are right now, I know you focus a lot on being financially literate.
Mhm.
And no matter if you're married and your husband makes a great salary and you contribute because you want to, not because you have to,
Right.
or if you are really depending on your salary, it doesn't matter. Financial literacy for the woman is of utmost importance for a variety of reasons.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how does a savvy financially literate woman get to be literate in this era that we're finding ourselves in?
You have to get the education from a trustworthy environment or source, and you have to be open, like you mentioned about being on this bell curve, right? So what we do is revolutionary in the financial industry because historically you haven't been able to be educated in the financial space, right? April is financial literacy month. So this is the month that you'll see all these big institutions, the banks and wirehouses want to come out and educate people, right? For 1 month out of the year, they want to educate people. But these are the same corporate interests who I don't have the numbers ready in my brain, but they skim billions of dollars annually in overdraft fees. But these are the same ones who want to come into the school and say, let me educate your children about financial literacy. Let me teach them how to open a bank account, right? So it's traditionally the financial space doesn't educate. That's not the purpose or the function of the financial space. It's been transactional. It's been very much like, this is what you do because this is what we said you're going to do. Not, this is what society says you should do. It's not because people have consciously chosen their financial situations. I would venture to say 99% of people are unsatisfied with their financial reality and they didn't choose it. They settled for it because they didn't know any different. It's just, hey, everybody has a 30-year mortgage and owes the bank $400,000. Everybody has tens of thousands in student loans. Everybody uses credit cards. Nobody saves. This is just what people do. Everybody has this type of account to save for their children's, just their education, nothing else. So education, we're in a place where the tides are changing, right? So we're coming at this in an entirely different way. It is not about a specific product or specific strategy. It's about understanding the concepts and empowering people to actually consciously choose what they're doing rather than just saying, oh, yeah, I have this type of account because that's what my uncle said, or my financial advisor said, or something I read on Google said that I should do this. No, why do you choose that? What is the purpose behind it? What is your understanding of this concept? So it's changing the traditional financial space, but it is like you said earlier, we're still in a position where people aren't necessarily sure, right? Like think about we're kind of like Uber in financial services because you talk about when Uber first came out, it was controversial. Like you talk about getting in the car with a stranger
Yeah.
who, I don't know who this guy is. So we're similar in that way, in that we're still kind of in a position where a lot of people don't understand it. They're like, what do you mean you're just gonna teach me? You know what I mean? Like, what's in it for you? So it takes even educating people about the fact that this is real. What we're doing is happening and it must happen. And it may not be something that financial services space is willing to share on. You know what I mean? Just like the yellow cabs might not have been too happy when Uber and Lyft came around, but
Yeah.
who takes yellow cabs anymore, right? So it's happening whether or not, individual people are ready to hear it or to understand it, but it's happening. So to answer your question, the way that a woman can get the financial literacy is to connect with people like me. It's not just me. There's thousands of us right now who are in the position of educating women financially to put a few priorities in order, like basic stuff like saving 10%. You know how many women I speak to who they just feel like I can't afford to save.
Yep.
But if a bill comes up, if the cell phone bill company or the electric company says your bill is 200 more dollars this month than it was last month, you're still going to pay it,
That's right.
right? So we've been prioritizing these corporations and the government above our own best interests for a long time. So teaching women like, hey, in all the work that you do, all the sacrifice that you make to make this money, who deserves to keep a portion of it? Not even most of it, just a little bit of it. And having them have that paradigm shift to say, you know what, I do deserve to actually directly keep benefit from my own work and not just give it all away to build the wealth of corporations that are already wealthy. So teaching that concept and teaching them about just the basic rules of money that we're never taught about, like compound interest, right? Most of us pay compound interest but we don't gain any of it because we don't understand it. We don't understand the different types of accounts. And recently, the market's been doing some hiccups and people are pissed, right? When I just spoke to a woman last week who was like, I don't even want to talk about what's happening in the market because I will turn into a different person. I'm pissed off right now and helping her understand that maybe let's make some adjustments because there's other things you can be doing to grow money in a way that you don't have to risk it all. And just helping them pursue goals that are important to all of us, but that we haven't been exposed to the possibility of, like financial independence at all. We think about retirement. Most of us think about retirement like a countdown. I was talking to my husband the other day, one of his friends who's getting ready to retire. He would be 55, but what does retirement look like? Is he going to maintain the same level of living? What is his income going to be the same? Where's the money coming from? What does he have it in? These discussions are not what women usually have. When I was a teacher, I counted down to retirement. I was like 25 years or 55 years old. That was my vision. There was no conversation about how much money do I need at that point? How much have I saved and what accounts have I saved and how do those accounts work? Will I be able to take out money at that time? Am I going to have to get another job? So helping women actually create a plan and make decisions based on their own goals rather than just figuring it out as we go along and winging it. So we have to connect with other women who we can relate to and understand and learn from. Not to say that you can learn from men too, but I know for me, and I think I'm pretty typical, a lot of us, we don't find financial topics exciting or we don't want to talk about budgets or retirement. These are words that just sound boring and I don't want to deal with it. But especially when the financial space has been very much like a secret society almost, like there's a lingo that we don't understand. I don't know what these terms mean. It's just above my understanding level. So being able to find someone who you can connect with and learn from in a genuine way, who doesn't make you feel closed from the topic, who makes you feel welcome, supported as you learn and make these paradigm shifts because they're pretty major changes. But as long as you have someone who you can work with and learn from, I think that's the key.
In what I do with cognitive behavioral therapy, everything can be spun if you think about it differently.
Mhm.
And that's really where the initial work begins.
Mhm.
Yeah, shifting your perspective on something.
Right.
So I'll just comment that. And then I think it's in the financial institution best interest if we are stupid about it. I mean, honestly, I don't know what the percentage is of the people that really want to press into that space and understand wealth generation
Mhm.
and understand how to create and sustain wealth.
Right.
I'm going to venture to bet it's a small percentage.
Right. Right.
So as long as the financial institutions can deal with that small percentage
Mhm.
of people that want to rise above, just your everyday average person and beat the system or
Right.
what, I think they're probably fine with it because
Yeah.
the lion's share of the population is not doing that. They're
Right.
not in that space to be really intentional about it. And because the financial institutions have made it so confusing.
Mhm.
I personally think that's where a lot of where my own personal fear had previously come from because number one, I'm not great at math.
Mhm.
Well, I kind of felt like any financial conversation I went into, that person on the other side of the desk was automatically going to have me over a barrel
Right.
because
Mhm.
I'm not quick with the figures up here. And so, they're drawing out these little with arrows and all of this. And I just have to accept and go, okay, well, they know more about it than I.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, can you imagine if we did that with another area of our life that we literally put so little time into
Yep.
understanding it and
Right.
we turned it all over to an expert,
Right.
where the heck we'd be in life?
Yeah.
You know,
You know
we
what
don't.
though? You talk about math. You know what's everybody's least favorite subject in school? It's always math. I mean, except for that small percentage, but
Yeah.
even if you have a natural proclivity towards those types of topics, what we are taught in the schools and in our employment environments doesn't even touch personal finance or wealth building, like you mentioned. So how do we even begin to learn that stuff if we spent the majority of our education excuse me, learning trigonometry and calculus, which has no bearing on reality in any way? And then something else you mentioned that I wanted to touch on is some of us we go out on this entrepreneurial path, right? But where do you think most entrepreneurs, what do you think they invest their money into?
Well, their business for one thing,
Pretty
but
much.
just managing the business. I would say it's not even technically really entrepreneurship. It's just self-employment, but it's just managing. It looks very similar to going and punching a clock because,
Exactly.
and some of that is not having enough capital for whatever business you're trying to launch. And so you've got a
Right.
shoe budget, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
That'd be my guess anyway.
No, you're right on the money. So most entrepreneurs, but like you said, self-employed people, they invest into marketing or inventory or business development. And that's all great. But we do that because we think that's what's going to give us the best return. That's what we know. Like this is our ticket, right? But who's teaching them how to save and build wealth outside of these investments in our business? So when you look at it, when you think about it, what percentage of businesses are not going to withstand a decade? Maybe they have seven, eight, nine, maybe 10 good years, maybe. And then one bad year wipes that business out
Yeah.
entirely. And what gets wiped out with the business is the family, right? We spent our savings on this. We've
Yep.
sacrificed for years to build this business. And now, because of anything, change in economy or politics or personal life, something happens where the family is entirely wiped out because nobody sits down and has these conversations. So in the financial space, someone might sit down with a business if they're already seven figures or there's a net worth already of seven figures, but nobody's sitting down with the small business owner to teach them about saving and building wealth separate from, in addition to a profitable business, so that if anything happens, there's a solid foundation to hold this family up. That's so important for self-employed people. And I just wanted to put that in there because we can't just invest in these businesses. We have to invest in our own stable foundations because the business, statistically speaking, is not. necessarily going to win just because we have the heart for it.
Sure. And a lot of self employed books, they have the freedom of being self employed, but life looks very much like it looked in financial terms, maybe even a little bit worse, depending on what their financial habits were when
Mhm.
they had a corporate job. Sometimes life looks just the same. I'm still a slave, baby.
Right? And I can't clock out ever.
That's right.
Can't take a day off. I can't go on a 2 week
Yeah.
vacation because nobody's gonna come run this business while I'm on an island somewhere. So it's true. We have more time, but not the lifestyle we thought, or vice versa.
Is there any way to, getting out of survival mode? Obviously, you can't ignore the economy, but I do think financial literacy is it goes above the economy. It will thrive no matter what the economy is doing.
Exactly. Yep.
So, how can you get out of survival mode in what is a bad economy where now I'm above the economy and it doesn't matter because I have gotten out of the regular system of money
Yeah.
and I've switched my paradigm. So what does that switch even look like?
It looks like creating your own economy. And it looks like maybe doing something different, because like you mentioned the economy, we can't predict it. Things happen every day. But when you think about industries, though, let's say the answer is multi-handed income, because you mentioned how solopreneurship maybe is a step above being employed, maybe, but there's no freedom there. It's still a limited income. So the answer is multi-handed income. That's just it. Multi-handed income is one that doesn't disappear when we disappear. It can be multiplied, right? It's independent of one individual person. But there's different industries that we can build a multi-handed income in. So when you think of stability, or when you, like you said, to be above the economy, what industry is always moving and growing and making money no matter what's happening in the economy is financial services. Nothing that happens in the economy is going to kill the financial services industry. The money's always moving, right? And unless the whole entire, like the whole system goes away entirely. But where we are now, money's always moving in any economy. You go downtown in any major city, all the tallest buildings are financial institutions, right? So if a person's willing to look into something that might not be what they expected, because so many people, they think the only way that I'm going to build a business is if it's something that I'm passionate about. Like, I'm a hairstylist. I can only build a hairstyle business. Cool. If you build a business around your passion, you're probably not necessarily going to be financially independent. You maybe be invested in the passion project, but you have to look at, where is there a need? Where's there a system that I can use? Where's the stability? So I think it's paradigm shift is necessary. People have to not think that there's only one path. If I'm a social worker, I can only do social work. It will require people to think differently about what they really want. Get serious about, what do I actually want for my life? What is a clear path to it? And if what we're doing now is not going to get us there, we have to be willing to change, honestly. And if we're not, cool. It's all good. We can stay comfortable, but staying comfortable is the path to staying broke,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And it's not just in money. It's the same thing with anything. Think about it in our fitness, for example. People want to be comfortable, then they'll probably be overweight. They're gonna eat good and not be fit. And maybe they'll pay the price later. It's kind of goes back to what you talked about earlier about education, the choice to do something that requires a difficulty, but it's all difficult. People say choose your hard, or you can say
Right.
choose your easy if you want. For some of us, it's easier to do something that there's a clear path, there's a clear need. When you look at the numbers, it makes sense. That's easier to me than just saying, hey, I'm a creative person. I'm just going to create books and I'll be financially free by selling my books on Amazon. Maybe, maybe it's not an impossibility, but I think it's easier and safer to go the way that's already been paved, and maybe make the money and get the freedom to pursue our passions through that.
I think you're exactly right. And as a matter of fact, just yesterday, I recorded a podcast and we talked about how passion can point to your purpose. What I would add, especially on the conversation that you and I are having today, let's normalize passion about wealth generation.
Mm,
Let's normalize passion about education, and let's
mm,
normalize passion about cycle breaking,
yes,
because I want to break the cycle where my boys don't have to figure this out at 50,
right,
where they're launched into the world already with what I didn't figure out until I'm in a 30-year mortgage
right,
going, I'm telling myself, I don't like this death note.
right,
That's important. I want nothing to do with this.
right,
So let's get passionate about educating not just our kids, but like what you're doing, people. Let's bring people into this. And there's certainly things that I'm passionate about. I'm doing one of them. I'm passionate about helping people see transformation in their
right,
personal life.
right,
But even greater than that is my passion for my own self to be in a position where I can even do this.
right,
So if you focus on the micro passions, I guess I'll use for lack of a better word, but you ignore the macro being cycle breaking, wealth
yeah.
generation, and wealth sustenance. Let's normalize that. At the same time, we are trying to bring out those things that our kids are passionate about.
And we could focus more on our passions if we weren't chasing money. This is what I'm saying. Logically, if we make more money, we can focus on the things that actually matter in a freer way than just trying to force things into spaces they don't fit. I want to have enough money where my kids can pursue whatever passions. I can pursue whatever passions without it being directly tied to money. I don't want my passions to be tied to my paycheck. I want to do something I'm passionate about for the art or for the fulfillment, not because if I do this, it's going to pay my bills this month. That actually takes the love out of the creative pursuit. So, just a side note, I totally agree with what you're saying, where we are changing things, we are reassessing our beliefs and choosing consciously what beliefs serve us better. And if I could just suggest a book that really helped me in my last few years of assessing my own beliefs, Steve Siebold has a book called 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class. It was such a good one because all he did is juxtapose the different mindsets of the poverty class, the middle class, and the world class. And it's very simple. It's not essay based. It's just like, hey, poverty class believes wealth is evil. Middle class believes wealth is for somebody else. And wealthy believe that wealth is our actual natural state of being. Reading that helped me a lot to realize some of the things that I had inherited beliefs about money and time were no longer serving me and they were actually even true. Put that out there for people.
That's a great resource. I wrote that down. You mentioned that I'll just call it the rat race,
Hmm.
that chasing money.
Hmm.
It is a lower frequency living,
Hmm.
and it keeps you trapped in that cycle. It is almost impossible if you are chasing money to pay bills
Hmm.
and selling your time for the paycheck. It is very hard to also then pay attention to what you do love to do. It's harder to cultivate your relationship with God. I don't think that any of it's impossible.
Hmm.
It's common, and it's what
Right.
we're very used to. We're used to putting all of those things that are really at our soul level, the things that we really love, we're used to putting those in a much smaller box because of the cycle that we're part of, chasing money,
Yep.
going to work every day and trading time for dollars. But it will be very hard to break cycles and get out of the current financial paradigm
Mhm.
by staying in that system. It just
And I have one last thought if I can, but there was an idea that I heard recently about God God's definition, not that I can speak for God, but if you think about it, like what is the actual value? When we talk about wealth, it's not money. Money is not wealth. It is fulfillment and connection in our families. That's the real wealth, right? But in the rat race that you described, we actually sacrifice the actual wealth for the false wealth that we put on the pedestal, right? So if God gave us, for example, our children are like God personified in our lives. They come, they help us to grow, they teach us lessons. They're just a gift, right? And what do we do in the status quo model is we sacrifice that gift into the state's program. We just give them up to the government or even private schools or whatever, but it's still like external. We put
Yep.
them out of our daily life. We don't even see them. Like you described, I lived like so many other mothers. We barely see these kids. We wake up, we get them out the door, we take them wherever they gotta go, and we go about our lives and we see them for a couple hours in the evening. So what we're actually doing is giving away the real wealth, which is in those relationships and those connections and watching our children grow in order to pursue the false god of money. So just want to put that out there too, and maybe finish with that thought. This is all about reclaiming wealth, right? Reclaiming our sovereignty, reclaiming our families and our faith and putting them back in the proper position. Cause I agree with what you're saying is that we put the real stuff in these little windows of time in between like dishes and bedtime and homework. And it's not the right balance.
No, it's perfect. And that actually was going to be my last question is how spirituality plays into all of this, because this is why we do what we do. And
Mhm.
with God at the forefront, uh, that was actually going to be my last question. Other than how can somebody find you and your resources if they're like, okay, I'm on board. I want to make changes.
My website may be a good place to start. I know people are active in different spaces. Some people like to email or to text or to use Facebook or Instagram, but I'm on any of those platforms and you can reach me in any of those ways. So I'll share my link to my virtual business card so people can find me in whatever way suits them.
Awesome. Okay. I want to thank LaToya for coming on the podcast today. And I really hope that this conversation sparked a desire in my listeners to want to begin thinking about getting off of that rat race, getting out of that system, and take a baby step toward wealth generation. Financial literacy is probably the best way to describe it. Take a step toward financial literacy. And if you don't know where to begin after listening to this, go check out some of LaToya's resources. And she's a wealth of information, as you can probably tell from this conversation. So I just encourage all of you to do that. And until next time, I will see you later.